Uh, Hello, this is my first YouTube video, so it's going to be kind of awkward for me to start with because I'm not used to speaking in front of a camera. So bear with me as I go through this. I want to address the passage where it quotes from Isaiah 7:14 that Yeshua, Jesus, will be named Emmanuel, born of a virgin. Um, so Of course, Matthew quotes, it says, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which means God with us. And that's Matthew 1:23. Okay, as I said, it's a quote from Isaiah 7:14, and he's using this to support the virgin birth. And there is, of course, debate whether that narrative of the virgin birth is given by that gospel writer or was a later addition. Um, but really, I don't think it affects the meaning of the passage at all. Um, but the sad thing is that most people take it to mean that it's saying that Yeshua, Jesus, is God, which I don't think at all that's what the author is trying to say to us. So the idea comes from Emmanuel, of course, which means God with us. And as I've done a little research, it would be better to say God's strength, because it's El is with us. So what is the author trying to tell us? So to start with, we're going to read Isaiah 7:14 in the passage as a whole, what the prophet came to Ahaz to say. And so let's go ahead and read that. We got, "Go out to meet Ahaz, you and Shear-Jashub," I guess that's right, "your son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the washer's field, and say to him, Be careful, be quiet, do not fear, and do not let your heart be faint because of these two smoldering stumps of firebrands, the fierce anger of Rezin in Syria and the son of Remaliah." Okay, and it's going to go through and basically tell him, don't be afraid of these people, these kings. They're not going to be able to do anything to you. So whatever they plan, he says, it shall not stand, and it shall not come to pass, for the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, and within 65 years Ephraim will be shattered from being a people. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. If you are not firm in faith, you will not be firm at all. So God asked Ahaz to ask for a sign. And he said, let it be as deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. But of course, Ahaz says, I'm not going to ask and put him to the test. So the prophet Isaiah tells him, he says, Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Shall eat curds and honey, when he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the boy knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land whose two kings you dread will be deserted. Okay, so the thing that's most important to know concerning this is that it is God instructing Ahaz to ask for a sign. Um, so really the prophecy itself is pertaining to what he wants to assure Ahaz of, uh, which is the two kings that he fears are not going to accomplish what they've planned or determined. Um, so this really has no futuristic meaning due to that fact. But that point aside, I'm just going to take it based as it is, future prophetic statements. So I'm just going to stick with that idea as I go through it. But so being that you are taking into consideration what God is giving Ahaz a sign for, it makes sense that Isaiah gives the name Emmanuel, because clearly he wants Ahaz to know by using the name, which means God's strength is with us, that he will do what he said and nothing is going to stop him from doing it. And it's also important to know, I think, that Isaiah said that his children were given to be signs to Israel. So I think that's important to remember as well. But something else to consider is that this child was born in the time of Ahaz as a sign for Ahaz. So that would have to mean, if indeed it's saying God was going to come in the flesh as Yeshua, then that would have to mean, if that's how you're going to apply it, that the child that would be born during Ahaz's time was also God in the flesh. That is just a logical conclusion if you think about it. Of course, I don't think anybody would go there. I hope not anyways. So it really makes it quite impossible to mean that God is going to come in the flesh. It would have to be both times. It would have to be that way. And obviously, it can't be that. So we also find Isaiah using Emmanuel in numerous other places. And a couple of those places in chapter 8, verses 6 through 8, he writes, "Because this people has refused the water of Shiloh, that flow gently, and rejoice over Rezin and the sons of Remaliah, therefore, behold, the Lord is bringing up against them the waters of the river, mighty and many, the king of Assyria in all his glory. And it will rise over all its channels, and go over all its banks. And it will sweep on into Judah. It will overflow and pass on, receiving even to the neck. And its outspread wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel." So you can see Emmanuel is being applied to Israel, or I guess you would say Judah, because Ahaz is in Judah. And later in verse 10 he writes, "Take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak a word, but it will not stand, for God is with us." So in both of these texts, it's clear he's speaking of people and not a singular person. Okay. Of course, in the second statement where it says God is with us, that is the Hebrew word Emmanuel. It's translated Emmanuel. So for whatever reason, they decided to not do that in that instance. I'm not quite sure why, but that's what they did. So it's obvious Emmanuel does not mean that God was going to become flesh, because it's applied to a nation, to people in general, as God's people, to let them know he's with them and to be a sign to Ahaz. Just reading some notes that I had to help me because my memory is terrible. So the gospel, Matthew's passage. Okay, so obviously it's used to support the virgin birth, but I don't think that's the point the writer's trying to make, is that he was going to be born of a virgin. So I'm not going to argue whether the virgin birth was an actual event or something, like I said in the beginning, that was added later. I think in the preceding verse it says that all these took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, which refers to Mary's supposed miraculous conception, But I think what he really wants to have the reader to focus on, okay, is that she's going to bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. The focus is not on his virgin birth, but or God becoming a man, as it's often taken. The focus, of course, the name Jesus or Yeshua, Yehoshua, means Yah saves. So it's about what Yeshua is going to do. That's the point the author is trying to make, that he is going to save his people, that God's strength is going to be with his people. He's going to deliver them through Yeshua. So as I said, the meaning of the name is what dictates the content, the understanding, the context. It's important to understand names have meanings in the Hebrew culture and language. So it says that he, Yeshua, will save his people from their sins, meaning that God is going to use him to bring redemption for the sins of his people. So in both cases, the names Emmanuel and Yeshua both are given to express something that God is going to do. They're a sign, not a prophecy, saying that God is going to become a man. And there's really no reason to complicate things. And I think if you take it and apply it that way, that it can actually fit and make more sense with what Isaiah is saying, rather than saying that God is going to become a man. Like I said, the virgin birth, whether or not that is actual event or not, that's not the point that the author is trying to make. The point he's making is that God is going to save his people through Yeshua when he comes. And that's my conclusion just from examining the passage. And so this is my first video, as I said. I'm learning how to do this thing by myself, just from watching others. I hope that that helps give a little bit better understanding of what Matthew, the author, whomever he is, of course he's anonymous, but Matthew is the name that's given to him by tradition. But I hope that helps, gives something for whoever's listening to consider, to think about, and see what makes more sense. Because one thing I've learned is if it doesn't make sense, it probably isn't true. So I hope this is a blessing to you and blesses somebody in some way. Alright, have a blessed day.